Welcome to the Growth Boss Podcast, where we explore the tools, strategies, and AI workflows helping businesses grow faster and smarter. I'm your host, Elena Nicole, and today I'm joined by Elston Baretto. He's going to be sharing with us how to generate 80,000 plus visitors from ChatGPT and other LLMs in 90 days. So Elston, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Hey, Elena, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. So for anyone who's not familiar with you and your work, can you give us a brief overview of who you are and what you do?
So I'm Elston. I founded a company called TinyHost, which is over 6 years old now. And it's essentially the simplest way to share your work online. That's our tagline. You can think of it as a cross between WeTransfer and Google Drive, so the simplicity of WeTransfer and the power of Google Drive. And my main kind of thesis with this was I wanted to make it easier to put stuff online. So originally we were just a HTML kind of web host. Now you can upload up to 100 different documents. And more recently we found a lot of people using us because they can now vibe code apps, websites, landing pages, little tools, and then they need somewhere to put it online. So ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini don't really offer easy hosting online solutions. So people will literally create it using one of these LLMs, but then download a HTML file and drag and drop, have a link in 10 seconds. And it literally is 10 seconds to have a link for you to share with whoever you need it to.
Amazing. And you said the company is going on about 6 years? Yeah. And how did you get into that work specifically?
How did I get into the idea?
The company you have now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted an easier way to share something online. So I wanted web hosting to be simpler than it currently was. And it was literally about scratching my own itch. So I knew that if you were technical and you knew how to, and you kind of spent maybe an hour or two configuring some things, you can create a very simple kind of setup for you to just easily, host things online. And so it was originally a developer tool, but it didn't really land well with developers because there's lots of options and a lot of them are free. And yeah, it's a very competitive space, but for non-technical people, it landed a lot better. So we ended up focusing really on building it out for, non-technical people, and we have developers users now as well. But it's really a tool that, democratizes web hosting, which is quite a technical concept for a lot of people. But more people are using the internet and sharing things online with a link, and that's why we exist.
Amazing. So we're going to dive into our topic for today, which is, again, how to generate the 80,000 plus visitors from ChatGPT and other LLMs in 90 days. Before we do, I'd just love to break down the basics. For anyone listening who, isn't familiar, what are LLMs, and can you give us some specific examples?
Yeah, so LLMs are large language models. And, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, they're all LLM based. So the whole, AI boom that you're seeing now in the past 2-3 years is basically down to LLMs. So they're essentially, work based on prediction. So it's a giant database of learnings and trained data that predicts what the next, closest match to a word would be, for example. So if it can basically form relations from everything in that database and effectively form this huge, brain and knowledge base, an LLM essentially will predict what the next word would be in a sentence when you kind of are trying to maybe write a blog article or something. But those similarities form this knowledge base that is vast, and you can basically query it on anything. It could be, a recommendation on a shoe or how to build basically, a barbecue or something like that, or even just technical kind of things. And so it's very, very powerful, and it's the foundation technology of what we see as AI these days.
Yeah. So a lot of business owners, SEO was always the thing that drove a big portion of a lot of businesses got their traffic from SEO. So can you talk a little bit about how is this different from that organic, Google and search engine traffic that we are used to? How is this different? And focusing more on this to drive traffic, how is that different?
Yeah, I mean, SEO, I think, was, I'd say, a version of like search and discovery that we're going to look back and see as quite archaic. So I think when we go and try to find, I don't know, let's say a good pair of, shoes for running. Typically, we put that in Google, and then we have lots of website results coming back, and then we'd have to click through each of these pages. Google will recommend you what they think is the best, maybe top 5. And then we click through each of these pages, and then we do some work to basically find our own kind of criteria and selection and figure out what shoes we want. AI and AEO is that on like steroids. So you just type in like find me the best running shoes, and it will give you, in a block of text what it thinks the best running shoes are based on all the data it already has, and also scanning the internet for existing results. So it's a lot faster kind of solution it's a lot faster way to get to your solution and answer your problem, answer your question. And what that means though is that there's less people clicking on websites, for example, right? So typically from a business point of view, people would browse and come across your website. They may not find the exact match, but they'll know of you, they'll click through, go away, come back, and you get, brand presence in that kind of search. But now it's a lot harder. So with AEO and, LLMs, they're only surfacing a part of what's out there, right? So they're trying to answer the question as quick as possible. So it means that it's even harder now to get in front of consumers and people searching for things, than it was before. So the game is completely changed. That being said, though, if you can get within those top query and results, then the traffic that you get and the conversion and is completely different, right? So it's a lot more high intent, it's a lot more highly converting than it used to be. And so it's super powerful once you do get in those kind of queries.
And that's what we're going to talk about, the step-by-step, right? When we get into that, I just have a couple more foundational questions. We talked about generating these visitors, assuming that's to websites we're talking about, right? Like directly to be able to make a purchase in some way. Okay, I just wanted to make sure on that. And then last question before we dive into it is, you have your, the topic is 80,000 visitors in 90 days. Why those numbers? Is that something that you all saw with your business? Is that something, that you've helped clients with? Where did those numbers specifically come from?
Yeah, that's from what we've seen on our results, right? So we've seen for a while that SEO has been kind of on the decline since, ChatGPT came on the scene, and people have been looking for alternate channels really to grow their business. And we've seen a huge boost probably around Q4 last year, where we started getting mentioning and picked up and cited in these LLMs. And then, I was just kind of retrospectively trying to get some numbers on that and facts on it. And we hit those numbers very, very well and still growing. And that's also translated to the supercharged growth that we've had as well, right? So we would typically get more, visitors than that on SEO. However, they weren't converting, as well as the traffic that you get from LLM. Yeah. So it's a very, very, cool number for us.
Interesting. Okay, so let's dive into it. So someone's hearing this and they want to get started. What is the very first thing they need to do to start generating this traffic?
It's the same thing with SEO in a sense that there's no easy hack. You can't kind of launch a website and get featured, in a week. You can run paid ads and get featured there, but that's a different game. Really like the same principles from SEO kind of, play here. So if you do just, start, building a website, you need to be writing content for that, right? So you need to be, on a blog, you need to have correct landing pages. And what LLMs really, prefer compared to other channels is basically short and concise summaries. So for example, in the old days, you'd write a blog article and you'd make it 800 to 1,000 words just to kind of get as much kind of, context as possible so Google can understand your article. But these days, you want that plus you want like a little snippet on top that basically answers the question literally in a few sentences, right? And so you'd write an article on like, what are the best, shoes for running? And that would be, 800, 900 words, which would be like a big review of everything. But you want that, but now you'd want like a paragraph saying the best shoes are kind of, these Nike shoes or whatever. And that's what kind of is rated. So those are kind of the nuances which are there. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is it's to get mentioned and featured in these LLMs, it's not just like a one-dimensional approach. So it's not just about SEO. They also, they pick up your brand and information from a lot of different sources. And this is always changing. So in the past year, it's been Reddit and YouTube, for example, that makes up a big portion of it. So Google is still like a foundational source for it. So 50, 60% plus will come from there. So you need to be ranking in Google and do everything you need to do in SEO. But, YouTube, being present on Reddit, also just socials. So it's about kind of, being in many different places all feeds into this model, right? Because LLMs are just constantly training on the internet, and also trying to figure out, where it should place more importance than others. And Reddit right now is a favorite. It could change, mainly because it's trying to find real reviews and real people responding to things, as opposed to kind of just AI generated stuff, which is part of the issues also in the current world that we live in.
When it comes to Reddit, from a business owner perspective or a marketer of a business, what should they be doing on Reddit?
Reddit is definitely a different ball game to other channels out there. So first of all, what you don't want to be doing is just constantly spamming and promoting your stuff. It's a place where you want to treat it as organic conversations, and so you want to be helpful. I think that's the best way to kind of think about Reddit. Like, you want to monitor, and there's loads of tools out there that will help you monitor like topics, questions, and things that are being posted on Reddit. Join the right subreddits for your community or your area, and then you want to be helpful, right? So you want to basically be responding to people, commenting on things. If there's questions and you have some expertise on something, you want to be there. And really, across the entire strategy for everything that you're doing, you want to be the subject matter expert, right? So going back to kind of running shoes example, you want to be the expert in in running shoes, right? And so you want to be answering people's questions about running. You want to be writing articles for that, but you really want to just be providing value rather than spamming it, because you will get banned and blocked. But you need to be active, right? So it's not about just making a comment here, one or two here. It's really about being a valuable part of that community. The more you post, the more credibility you get, the more you have a license to post more, the more content you have on Reddit, the more an LLM will pick you up and feature you and cite your answer. So it's a forum effectively, right? And it's really about, I think, adding value to that kind of forum is the best way to play Reddit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how about YouTube? What are we doing differently now on YouTube to help with the traffic through the LLMs versus what maybe we were doing, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years ago, which was more focused on the search terms and search topics?
Yeah, I think with YouTube, you're still targeting keywords around it as well. So keywords that rank for SEO purposes. I think with LLMs as well, it's still a bit kind of difficult to understand what they're doing, because they don't kind of surface the exact algorithms and how they kind of weight things. But it is about trying to also answer queries or questions in a way that isn't like keyword oriented, right? So it could be more tutorial based kind of things. It could be when people search with LLMs, they don't just type in a few keywords, right? They type in sentences, or they type in large prompts, and you kind of want to target those, right? And so SEO would have been what are the best running shoes, for all terrain. But in the AEO world, it would be something like, I'm planning on, running a marathon, and I train basically in the woods, and it's very rural right now. I want to find the best, support shoes. They're also comfortable, but also help me run fast. So that's kind of a different way people will search. And so you want to create content in that way, which is a bit more explanatory and basically, answers queries and prompts in a way that is, a lot more in depth, I think.
Interesting. So it sounds like more specific, and also thinking about specifically what prompts may be entered and creating your content somewhat around that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a bit harder than the SEO world right now, because in SEO, you have a lot of tools out there which tell you what people are basically searching for. I mean, you can kind of just create the content for that. Here, it's very difficult, because there's no data on what people are prompting about, what people are writing, and also it's very, very varied and personal, and it's a conversation, right? So you may not appear at first, but you may appear later on. So it may appear 5 or 6 prompts down the line. But there are tools out there where you can make some best estimates, that you can kind of translate an SEO phrase to what people would potentially prompt, and you can track, for example, your citations in there. So we use, I think it's called Smart Prompt, a smartwatch or something like that. No, PromptWatch, sorry. And they'll basically essentially watch the prompts that you think are being prompted, and then you can see your visibility and whether you're being mentioned or not in those tools, and then improve things on that. And essentially it all comes back to content, right? So these tools will tell you what is being cited, whether it's a Reddit post, whether it's a YouTube video, whether it's a blog post, and you just want to either get mentioned in those content pieces of content, or create your own to improve your visibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When it comes to other social media platforms like TikTok or Instagram, or Meta in general, is there any differences in creating content for those, or does it kind of fall under the same guidelines that we talked about for YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's the same guidelines, and I think it's authenticity, right? I think what's going to happen in the AI world is more and more people are just going to be creating, AI slop, as we say, just generic kind of stuff. People are looking for just, a tone of voice and the individuality, expertise, and that's really where I think the best content is going to, sit around. So it's really about doing, what you're doing already, but more of it and just being more authentic, I think, and that's where I think it's gonna really matter more and more. Is the authentic content is going to get featured a lot more, whereas in the SEO world, I wouldn't say it's very authentic. I mean, many people have this experience where they click on an article and it'll basically spend 50% of the article telling you like what a running shoe is, for example, and at the bottom it just tell you the best shoes. And that world is kind of dying out because people want answers quickly, and so it's about just being authentic, and it's being like I myself as a individual have tried a lot of these shoes out or whatever, and this is my opinion on it, and that's where you'll get picked up.
Does it differ between the different LLMs what they kind of prefer, or is it if you do these things that we're talking about, generally you're going to be recommended by most of them? How does that work?
Yeah, it definitely differs. I mean, they all have their own like formula algorithms, what they like, what they don't like. Like Google, for example, signed a big data partnership with Reddit, and they have YouTube, right? And so they also have Google search. So obviously you get in Google search, you're going to get featured in Gemini. And yeah, like ChatGPT also can be a bit rogue sometimes, in the sense that there are hacks out there where, for example, you can put out a press release, or you can put out articles which get picked up quite soon, but you have very low authority in that expertise or in that domain. And so it kind of will surface a bit more experimental stuff. Claude is a bit more technical on that kind of side. So they all have their own kind of strengths and weaknesses. I guess the benefit, though, compared to the old world, is like the old world it was all Google. Like if you think SEO, really it's just Google. Like everyone was using Google, but now there is a divide. So you may not be featured in ChatGPT, but you could be featured in Claude or Gemini. And so there's 3 or 4 different, or even Perplexity, right? So there's a lot of different platforms that you could get mentioned on, but it doesn't mean tweak and tailor yourself to one or the other. I think it's just about doing a good job on what they're saying, they're referencing, and putting it out, and then seeing what gets picked up.
Yeah, that makes sense. When it comes to, from your experience and other businesses maybe that you've potentially seen or worked with, what would you say if someone was going to start with this? What would you recommend starting with? Like, where have you seen the biggest result from which actions or which tactics?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say you need to, first of all, get your SEO strategy covered and sorted. Like, even if you don't get featured in LLMs, SEO is not dead as such. Still a lot of traffic through that. But that playbook is there, and you can, use it as it is. But I think the biggest other channels are definitely YouTube and Reddit. So I'd say definitely try to focus on that. Like, understand Reddit, get to be an expert in there, and YouTube as well. I think those are the biggest plays that we do, really. And yeah, it's resulted in the traffic that we do have. And we're very small, definitely in our space, right? So they're huge VC billion-dollar kind of companies, unicorns, that are all trying to get mentions in kind of these quite competitive queries. And we're there, right? So we're bootstrap, we're a lot smaller for sure, but we're still getting featured there. So those kind of angles are definitely working and working well. So I'd definitely say focus on those at the beginning.
And we talked a little bit about consistency, and you had said just create more. If you're doing that already, like do more of it. Is there a certain number per week, per day that you've seen be effective? If we could put numbers to that, what would that look like?
Yeah, I think it's also about quality rather than quantity these days in the world. So, but it doesn't mean like put out one article, I don't know, a month. Like we put out one article a week. We could possibly put out 2, I think. Video wise, again, like we are putting out, maybe 1 to 2, videos a week as well. So it really depends on, your resources and capabilities as well, right? So I wouldn't say, like put out content every single day, put out an article every single day at the expense of the quality. That kind of used to work like 3-4 years ago, where you'd basically just find the keywords and just write tons of content on it, and then you just constantly be like ranked and picked up.
Yeah.
But now it's a lot harder, especially, and people I think make the mistake of like, now there's AI, I'm just gonna use AI to write me 50 articles like in a week, and then I'm just put them all out. I don't think that's kind of gonna work as well. So, but I would say, yeah, maybe 2 to 3 pieces of content is a good amount on YouTube and blog articles. But obviously, if you're starting out, yeah, that's kind of a good thing. We've already got a bigger brand and presence, so we're not as aggressive on that kind of stuff. But at the beginning, you want kind of a lot of content.
Yeah.
But quality content, I think, is also important.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see others making trying to get this LLM traffic, or maybe even some of the things that you all learned along the way?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, honestly, is just people trying to use these tools that basically promise the whole world, basically, where you just kind of put in their website and kind of their background and everything, and then press a button and it just does everything on autopilot.
Mhm.
And like that can probably get you somewhere, but it's not like these strategies are long-term strategies. I think everyone tries to look for like a silver bullet. They try to look for like, how do I get there in like tomorrow or a week? I need to get there now. And AEO is AI engine optimization is based on SEO. Like they're very, very similar. And SEO, it took us 6 months basically to start to really get like proper organic traffic coming through. So it's really about patience. I think that's a big thing, and time, and quality over quantity. I think those are the main things that are important. And yeah, don't buy into snake oil. Like if someone promises you to get instant kind of mentions and stuff, like you may get there at the beginning, but really you need to build a foundation to get there permanently, right? So you can basically, maybe there's hacks. As these LMs are constantly changing, they're waiting on what kind of information they put in, they favor or not. You can probably find kind of arbitrage opportunities, but they'll disappear, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot of experimentation, but ultimately they're trying to figure out what is the best content they can surface. So I think it is about, patience, quality, and having a strategy rather than trying to find like this service or like a automated kind of way of just basically, kind of doing it
Yeah.
for you. Like you have to put in the hard work, basically. That's the bottom line.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Are there any other AI tools that you all are using for your content strategy that helps with this that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, I mean, there's tools like Screaming Frog, which are more in the SEO play. We don't use a lot more AI specific tools. Like from the SEO, we use Ahrefs for keyword analysis. SEMrush is also alternative. We are pretty big on like checking for originality. So there's tools like, I think it's Originality Checker, where you can run an article through it and it'll tell you like what percentage it thinks is AI generated. Yeah, some people believe them, some people don't. It's obviously not a kind of a complete 100% way of knowing how Google will treat your article, or Gemini, or or ChatGPT. But it does, I think, help with understanding, how do you get an original position, authentic information out there, and becoming an expert. So treat it with a pinch of salt. Yeah, those are the main things. And you can use Claude as well, right? Itself to kind of create outlines for you, do the research around it, and figure out, what you kind of need to work on. But like these LLMs also, they know how to get featured in themselves. So you can also just ask them, right? So
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
I'm writing this article, I'm thinking of making this YouTube video. How do I optimize it, or what do I need to do to get featured? In the LLM. I was using Claude yesterday, and it's got plugins with Ahrefs, for example, that will just also go find you the keyword analysis, come back to you, and tell you what you need to do. So use them as a conversational piece, and have a real conversation with them to understand like what you need to do, and that they're knowledgeable itself, right, to do that.
Yeah, that's the amazing piece of this. You can ask them, what to do to rank higher with them. As far as, we talked about 90 days. So when it comes to like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, is there anything that you're watching for? How are you evaluating as you go along to hit that benchmark?
I think it's stepping stones, right? So really, you want a graph, obviously, that goes to the top right. But I think, in the like the first month with what we did, we just kind of were launching. Well, we're trying. One thing that's I didn't talk about is backlinks, right? So you want to get a steady number of links to your website or whatever you are putting online, and it's not too much that signals like it's spam, but it's kind of maybe like 15 to 20 kind of links a month, and that also ties to SEO, which is then kind of feature in AEO. But then I think from a metric perspective, it's just seeing origin, like having patience in that sense. So at the beginning, yes, I think at the beginning it's about being okay and comfortable with having a few hundred visitors using Google Search Console or all the analytic tools out there to basically see trickles coming through, and then you probably want to get into like the low thousands, and then slowly see that kind of rise. So I wouldn't say like it's like first month 1,000, second month 5,000, third month like 50,000 kind of game. It starts off really really slow, and then it really can just snowball once you kind of get a lot of things going. And it's like any relationship, I'd say, in that sense. So it's at the early days you're very very kind of cautious about if it's that person you met or something, but then later you're taking big steps, and that's how Google will treat you, right? Originally, like when you first launch your website, Google doesn't trust you, doesn't know you, just exist, just showed up. And so Google will slowly start to crawl your website and basically figure out, whether you're worthy or not. But then you'll get bigger and bigger mentions as Google trusts you and sees you're there for a while and understands like who you are and what you are. Same thing with Reddit, same thing with YouTube. They all have their own algorithms, they all have their own, credibility profiles. Reddit has karma, so the more more helpful you are, the more votes you get, the more your content weights, or it's considered credible when you post something new. It's all that kind of stuff. So be comfortable, I think, with just like very very low beginnings, and then after 3 to 6 months, you basically start to see something more fruitful happening, and in 6 months to a year, it's where you're already in kind of the good region.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thanks so much, Elston. So where can people find you and connect with you?
So you can just go to tiny.host. That's kind of the product that I've built. And then you can find me on LinkedIn, Elston Baretto, or X. I'm very kind of on it with my DMs are always open. So that's just x.com/_Baretto. And always open to being helpful and answer anyone's questions.
Well, this was such a great conversation. I know I learned so much, and I'm sure our audience did as well. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
And to our audience, I hope you found this as insightful and eye-opening as I did. If you are ready to put these ideas into action, you have everything that you need to get started. Please like, subscribe, or follow on whatever platform you're using. And whatever you do, don't share this episode with your competitors. Thanks for listening to the Growth Boss Podcast.